Thank you. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Perlmutter, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panelists today for your testimony. And, you know, last summer, maybe it was 2 summers ago, I was out walking a precinct in my district in an area that, you know, has 10 units, 15 units, 20 units. And a woman came to me, or I went to her door, and she was crying when I got there and said, my rent keeps going up about $100 every 6 months, and I can't, an older woman, I can't afford this anymore, and I don't know where I'm going. And, you know, on a fixed income, and I was there, I said, okay, you know, we tried to figure out, you know, we don't have rent controls in Colorado. The market will be what the market is, and I'll get to Mr. Hendricks, and we'll talk about ideology and the intellectual approach that the Manhattan Institute takes to real people's lives in housing. But I'd like to ask a question, because we've had a strong real estate market in Colorado, and you go through zoning hearings, and people fight whether they're going to go for rezoning or not for rezoning. Ms. Jaya Chandran, in your testimony, you discussed the challenge of preserving affordable housing in a hot real estate market. We've seen this in the Denver area. How can this be addressed?
There are several ways that it can be addressed, most of which require investment at the federal, state, and local level. At the federal level, subsidies such as project-based Section 8, investments in CDBG and home can help preserve those affordable housing assets. Contracts like project-based Section 8 rental assistance allow an owner to take on debt and equity that can be infused in the property to renovate it and preserve and extend its affordability. Resources like CDBG and home are capital subsidies that can help renovate the properties and preserve them for the long term. And these are all older programs. We also need new solutions for today's affordable housing preservation. What a lot of people don't recognize is that project-based Section 8 was repealed in 1983. We're 20 years into the 21st century, and it's been almost 40 years since we've had rental assistance, a new rental assistance program. The appropriations, the 11-some billion dollars of appropriations that Congress appropriates for project-based Section 8 is just renewing contracts that for the most part were created before 1983 or moved over from public housing. We need new subsidy solutions.
So let me turn to Mr. Desmond and ask him a question. Said, you know, in your testimony you talk about slow wage growth, high housing costs, and lack of adequate federal funding to support housing assistance. If Congress were to fully fund housing support across the country, as has been suggested by the chairwoman, what type of effect would that have on cyclical poverty for individuals?
It would be a game changer. Families finally would receive that breath that they feel when they're paying what they should be paying for housing. They'd be able to root down in communities. Kids could go to the same school every consecutive year, build relationships with teachers and guidance counselors. Families could save. They could invest in job training classes, community college classes. It could be a massive anti-poverty and economic mobility solution.
And this question goes to all the panelists. My question is, and I'd also ask the same thing of all my colleagues here, Democrats and Republicans. When was the last time you were to a zoning hearing to increase density and to allow for affordable housing? Was it anybody done that within the last year? Okay. Anybody, how about within the last couple years? So, Mr. Hendricks, let me ask you a question, because I appreciate the sort of the intellectual approach you've taken and the ideological approach, and, you know, I'd say, sure, let's have more housing supply. Duh, that'd be easy, but it takes money, and it takes the appropriate zoning. So, when was the last time you were to a zoning hearing in the suburbs, for instance, on affordable housing to increase density and reduce the cost of an apartment house? A couple, let's say 100, 200 units. When was the last time?
I live in Manhattan, and I know better than a lot. I know very well how expensive it is to live in Manhattan. It's far away from the suburbs, and it's very expensive.
Well, when was the last time you were to a zoning hearing? Because I appreciate your testimony, and intellectually makes a lot of sense. Let's increase the housing supply. Let's make more affordable housing available. But when you go to those individual local zoning hearings, people say, no, I don't want any more housing here. This isn't, that's the problem. It is about politics. I yield back.
Thank you. I think you're talking about not in my backyard.
Yeah.
That's what I think you're talking about.